The theater lights dimmed slowly, and a soft wave of excitement rippled through the packed crowd. It was the summer of 1969, and the legendary Elvis Presley had just returned to live performances after years away from the stage. Tonight's show was in Las Vegas, and every seat in the Grand Theater was filled with fans eager to witness the king of rock and roll in person. The velvet curtain shimmered under the stage lights as the orchestra began playing the familiar opening notes. The crowd erupted into cheers even before Elvis appeared. People stood, clapped, and shouted his name. Elvis, Elvis, Elvis. Then, suddenly, the curtain parted. There he was. Dressed in a dazzling white jumpsuit with a wide jeweled belt, Elvis stepped onto the stage with his unmistakable swagger. His dark hair glistened under the lights, and the moment he picked up the microphone, the crowd's excitement exploded. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," Elvis said with a warm grin. "It's good to be back." The applause lasted nearly a full minute. Elvis launched into the first song, his powerful voice filling every corner of the theater. The audience swayed, clapped, and sang along. Every note carried the magic that had made him a global icon. But halfway through the show, something unexpected happened. Near the middle rows sat a man named Daniel Carter. Daniel wasn't a celebrity or a musician. He was a regular guy in his early 30s, visiting Las Vegas with a group of friends. They had come mostly for fun, gambling, and the thrill of seeing Elvis live. Daniel had always been known among his friends as a bit of a joker. He loved teasing people and making bold claims, even when he didn't entirely mean them. Earlier that evening, while Elvis was performing one of his slower ballads, Daniel leaned toward his friends and whispered with a grin, "You know, I bet I could sing with him." His friends laughed. "Yeah, right," one of them said. "You can barely sing karaoke." Daniel shrugged dramatically. "I'm serious," he said jokingly. "Give me a microphone and I'll challenge Elvis right here." They laughed again, assuming he was just fooling around. Unfortunately for Daniel, he had spoken just loud enough for someone nearby to hear. That someone happened to be one of the event staff. The man raised an eyebrow and leaned toward Daniel. "You think you can challenge Elvis?" he asked with a smirk. Daniel chuckled. "It's just a joke," he replied. "Relax." But the staff member didn't seem to think it was just a joke. A few minutes later, as Elvis finished another song and the applause settled, the staff member quietly walked toward the side of the stage. No one noticed. Not the audience, not Elvis, and certainly not Daniel. Moments later, Elvis wiped his brow with a towel and smiled at the audience. "You folks having a good time tonight?" The crowd roared. Then Elvis chuckled and said something that immediately caught everyone off guard. "Well now, I just heard something interesting backstage." The audience leaned in. Elvis looked out into the sea of faces and said with playful curiosity, "Apparently, there's a gentleman out there who thinks he can challenge me." The crowd laughed loudly. Daniel froze. His friends slowly turned their heads toward him. "Oh no," one of them whispered. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. Elvis continued with a mischievous grin. "Now I don't know where this fella is, but I'm told he's somewhere in the middle rows." A spotlight began sweeping across the audience. People cheered and pointed playfully as the beam moved from seat to seat. Daniel tried to shrink into his chair, but it was too late. The spotlight landed directly on him. The entire theater erupted with laughter and applause. Elvis pointed toward him from the stage. "Well, look at that," he said with a grin. "There he is." Daniel's friends were laughing uncontrollably. One of them nudged him. "Go on, superstar." Daniel raised his hands nervously. No, I was joking." But the crowd had already started chanting. "Let him sing. Let him sing." Elvis laughed warmly. "Come on up here, son," he said. "Let's see what you've got." The entire theater buzzed with excitement. Daniel stood slowly, his face turning bright red. He had expected a fun night watching Elvis perform. He had not expected to walk onto the same stage. As he made his way down the aisle, the crowd clapped rhythmically. Some whistled and cheered. Daniel reached the stairs beside the stage and hesitated. Elvis stepped forward and extended his hand. "Don't worry," Elvis said kindly. "We're all friends here." Daniel shook his hand nervously. Up close, Elvis's presence was overwhelming. The confidence, the charisma, the legendary voice. Daniel suddenly realized he might have made the biggest mistake of his life. Elvis handed him a microphone. So, Elvis said with a playful smile. What's your name? Daniel, he replied. Well, Daniel, Elvis said. What song are we singing? The crowd laughed again. Daniel swallowed hard. I didn't think I'd get this far. Elvis chuckled. That's all right. We'll figure something out. The band members watched curiously, clearly amused by the situation. Elvis leaned toward them and said, let's try something simple. The band began playing a familiar tune. It was one of Elvis's classics. Daniel's heart pounded as the music started. He expected the crowd to laugh the moment he opened his mouth. And honestly, he wouldn't have blamed them. But something strange happened when Daniel began to sing. His voice wasn't perfect, it wasn't polished, but it was genuine, raw, and surprisingly strong. The crowd's laughter slowly faded. People exchanged surprised glances. Elvis raised his eyebrows slightly. Daniel continued singing, growing a little more confident with each line. The theater grew quieter, then quieter still. By the time they reached the chorus, the audience was completely silent. No laughter, no whispering, just listening. Elvis leaned toward Daniel and joined him in harmony. The two voices blended together in an unexpected duet. It wasn't planned, it wasn't rehearsed, but somehow, it worked. Daniel's nervousness melted away as the music carried him forward. The band smiled. The audience stared in amazement. And Elvis looked genuinely impressed. When the final note rang through the theater, there was a brief moment of stunned silence. Then the entire crowd erupted into thunderous applause. People stood from their seats. Some even whistled and cheered louder than before. Daniel stared at the audience in disbelief. He hadn't expected this reaction. He hadn't expected anything like this. Elvis placed a hand on his shoulder and grinned. Well, I'll be, he said into the microphone. Looks like we found ourselves a singer tonight. The crowd cheered again. Daniel laughed nervously. I promise I didn't plan this, he said. Elvis chuckled. Sometimes the best moments aren't planned. He turned to the audience. What do you say, folks? Should Daniel stay for another one? The theater exploded with excitement. Daniel looked at Elvis in shock. Another one. Elvis winked. Don't worry, he said. I'll help you. The band prepared for another song, and this time Daniel felt something completely different. Not fear, excitement. The second performance was even better. Daniel's confidence had grown, and Elvis encouraged him with every verse. The audience clapped along with the rhythm, fully invested in the unexpected collaboration. When the song ended, the standing ovation lasted nearly 2 minutes. Daniel could barely believe what had happened. He had entered the theater as just another fan. But for a few incredible minutes, he had shared the stage with the king of rock and roll. Elvis leaned toward the microphone one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, he said warmly, sometimes a joke turns into something special. He looked at Daniel. Tonight, it sure did. Daniel thanked Elvis and returned the microphone. As he walked off the stage, the audience continued cheering. His friends were jumping and shouting when he returned to his seat. I can't believe you just sang with Elvis. One of them said. Daniel shook his head in disbelief. Neither can I. The rest of the concert continued, but the story of that unexpected moment spread through the theater like wildfire. People would later talk about it for years. The night a regular man jokingly challenged Elvis, and ended up creating one of the most unforgettable moments the audience had ever witnessed.